What's up, outliers? Welcome to Performance Bites, for bite sized insights into complex subjects in health and performance. Today, we are going to talk about some lessons that I've been learning rather than necessarily performance bites. But these lessons are actually super, super important. And funny enough, they're around me actually training for an event. So the event that I've been training for is Hyrox, which is becoming fairly popular. But if you haven't heard of Hyrox, Hyrox is a fitness competition which involves running, lifting, jumping, all this sort of stuff. So it's pretty athletic, pretty challenging. And essentially, how the setup is for a high rocks is you run a kilometer, which is 1,000 meters, which is also two and a half laps around a track if you're not familiar with it. So run a kilometer, then you do a station, run a kilometer, do a station. You do that 8 times. So you're running 8 kilometers, which is just under 5 miles, and then you're doing eight basically fitness stations within doing that. Now, in this episode, what I really want to go over is 5 lessons I've actually learned from training for High Rocks, and I haven't even done it yet. So the big thing that I really want to kind of emphasize is training for something just can be so beneficial, not just for the sake of your health or your performance or whatever the case be, but can be really beneficial to just help you elevate yourself in different ways that maybe you didn't know that you could in the past. And definitely, like for myself, I have a pretty athletic background and I was not expecting to, get a bunch of lessons from this. It's been a while since I've trained hard for an event, and so it's been kind of a fun little treat to go through actually like creating a program, having it periodized, and, having deload weeks and really emphasizing how important those deload weeks are because my body needs to rest and recover and it needs to get back to a baseline where it can go, work hard again, but not just pound myself into the ground. So it's been kind of a cool thing. And, my athletic background, I grew up racing motocross, done that since I was 4 years old, so 28 years of doing that. But I was also a collegiate sprinter, so, I have competed a lot and I've trained a lot, but it's been for different types of things. Once my college track and field experience was over, I started to dabble within obstacle course racing and did that at a fairly, elite level, but not the best of the best. But did it for quite some times, about 3 or 4 years, and that was kind of my next, like, outlet after, college. So, going into, like, training for something like a high rocks, it's kind of piggybacking off of my experience of training for obstacle course racing, which, involves running and climbing and lifting and moving, weird shit essentially. And it's been a really long time actually since I've even done an obstacle course race. So this is definitely like my first time back into training really hard for a specific activity, a specific event where there's a date. I need to be ready by said date and be able to go do it at a high level. Now, for this event, I also signed up for Men's Pro, which that's not because I think I'm a professional and something I've never done before, of course, but it was more so to give myself an opportunity to train harder and have motivation behind, like, I don't wanna go make myself look stupid. So, setting a goal essentially, that I can put out into the world, people see it, so there's some accountability in that, in knowing that, my friends and my family know that I'm gonna go compete at this pro level, but also if I go to the event in the pro division and I, completely embarrass myself, that's on me. I know that I have an athletic ability that I can go be really good, but I had to train hard for it. So I use that as a motivator and also something that could just be, intrinsically driven every day when I go train to be like, hey, like, don't go embarrass yourself. Like, go train really hard and use that as an opportunity to be better. And on race day, on the day that you compete, if you come up short, at least you know that you did your best and whatever your time is your time at the end of the day. Now, the first lesson that I've learned while training for High Rocks without actually even competing in it is I've learned that it's so important to have structure. It doesn't mean that I haven't had any sort of structure on my training or anything like that prior to the last 11 weeks, but It really just has been more so like maintenance on my body. I would have maybe like a strength goal of trying to hit a PR within a deadlift or a squat or something like that. But nothing that was really like tangible to take out of the gym and actually go put on display other than, those things. And, so the level of which I like dedicated myself to, say, like a PR and a squat or something like that, super important. Obviously, great. You got to take it serious. You could also hurt yourself. Like, you do need to take it serious, but it wasn't very high because there wasn't a timeline that was attached to it. Any week that didn't go to plan, I could easily just like move it over to the side and be like, well, I'll just get to that next week, or I'll do that on Friday instead of Thursday. I'll do this, I'll do that. And I could really just kind of wiggle around things because there was no big timeline, and also at the end of the day, if I didn't hit a PR, it's not a big deal. No one knows the difference. This is just for me, like, yeah, it's cool to tell your friends that, you went from a 295 back squat to a 315, which is what I was able to do last year. But like, it's not that big. Like, that's not really putting that much out there. And also, I've been telling a lot of people this, and especially my athletes that I work with. I'm like, hey, like, the difference of 20 pounds in a movement isn't really going to transfer that greatly outside of the gym, into your sports performance. It can, but just think about what's more important if you're a runner, lifting 5 more pounds or being able to run better, right? So at the end of the day, these goals that I've had over the last few years, essentially since removing myself from competitive competition other than just racing moto, which I never really like train specifically for moto. I go out, I stay in shape, I have fun, and just stay safe. But yeah, it's been a few years since I've actually like hunkered down, created a program that was based around a timeline, based around specific goals and adaptations that I would like to achieve to be able to go do the activity or the sport to the best of my ability. And so the biggest thing that I really kind of learned from that is my body has so much more in it than I ever would have expected, because the body likes to basically govern an energy at its least amount at all times, right? It want to be as efficient as possible. That MPG want it to be as high as possible. So the body doesn't want to put out high energy if it doesn't have to. And what I've really kind of figured out is like, oh, there's another bit of, reserve that I haven't even tapped into because there hasn't been a demand or an ask for it to happen. But having a training program with the proper adaptations and everything like that has really, really helped me to go that extra inch. And within doing that, realizing that I have a lot more to give within my training and, a lot more that I can do outside of training at home with my supplements and my recovery and stuff like that, that really, at the end of the day, is making a huge difference. Now, I'm not going to say like I'm going to go out there and win or anything like that, but I definitely feel a lot better over the last 11 weeks of training hard specifically for this event than I did the 11 weeks prior when I wasn't really training for anything. And my performance shows it, like the numbers on paper as far as my running and my lifting and all that stuff definitely are up. And it's all just because of sticking to a structure and having a little bit more accountability with myself, as a coach, programming for myself. That tends to be kind of a challenging thing sometimes because no one's holding myself accountable. And I have worked with other coaches and stuff like that, but I was very specific about how I wanted to create this program and what I wanted out of this program, which is great because I made it to be, specific for the event of Hyrox and also the adaptations that I felt like I needed for Hyrox. Lesson that I've learned from training for Hyrox, and I kind of laugh a little bit about it because, as I said, I was a collegiate sprinter. I competed in obstacle course racing for a few years at a decently competitive level. And the second thing that I've learned is actually how to run properly, which sounds so silly because obviously we know how to run. Like a lot of people, if I said, hey, like run over there, go grab that, we all can do that, right? Um, but something as much as I would like to believe that I was a good runner before, my form wasn't great. My efficiency was terrible, honestly. And that's largely due to a 10-year career of sprinting 100 meters. Sprinting has a different mechanics to it as far as like hip extension and also knee drive and where your hips are going and stuff like that. So whenever I would run, I would kind of run like I was sprinting in a way, which sounds silly. So I'd cover a lot of ground, but like my frequency in my stride was not very good, because I would simply just lose a lot of the energy when I put it into the ground because I was basically bounding. So something that I have learned and figured out with training for Hyrox is to slow myself down, which I did early on in my training program, and actually feel proper running form for once. And, the big thing that I personally focused on was pulling my heel up towards my butt and allowing more of a circular drive underneath me rather than always trying to like reach ahead or trying to like bound ahead as well. And so that has really transferred over and allowed me to be more efficient at running, which, yes, I did go actually do a track meet this past year, which is awesome. It was a really good experience, and I'll probably do another one this coming summer. But to actually know how to run with efficiency, I think is a really good skill set that a lot of people would benefit from because proper running, if you're going to go out and say even just run a 5K or something like that, being able to do it well is going to reduce chances of injury and it's going to feel better and you're probably going to perform better too. So I think there's just a lot of value in the biomechanics of knowing how to move properly. And it's not to say that, what I did to change my running form to make it more efficient and make myself more efficient is going to be the thing that helps other people do it because everyone needs something a little bit different. And also, we have to take into account like, have you been running super efficiently? Maybe not perfect, but super efficiently your whole life a certain way. And if we change that, would that actually cause more issue, right? So I've never been efficient as a runner. I've always been a wonderful sprinter. So having learned how to properly run now, I feel really good about, how my body feels from it and also what I get out of it because frankly, running is tough. And if you're not enjoying it at least a little bit during or a little bit after, it's really tough to stay motivated to keep going out there and doing it, especially like right now in winter. It's cold. So anything to make it more efficient and better, I think is a wonderful thing. And also the chances of injury reducing is also awesome. Lesson number 3 that I've learned is proper tools go so freaking far. So as I was just talking about increasing my efficiency within running, increasing my ability in my form and everything like that, not only does that come from me moving right, but it's also comes from me using the right tools. So since I've had such a big career in sprinting, and that's more so what I've done for running for such a long time, um, I can't really clock shoes the way that most runners would clock shoes. If you think about most running shoes, they have a lifespan of 300, 500 miles, depending upon the shoe, the compound, and all that stuff. Well, those numbers are based upon running. They're not based upon sprinting, and sprinting is a very aggressive, movement and has a lot more force impact than just running. So the shoes wear differently and also they wear out a little bit quicker. And so I was very used to just basically beating the crap out of a shoe until it just had nothing less left to it within sprinting. Uh, but come to find out when you're clocking a bunch of kilometers or miles and you're just running at a very sustainable but good pace, you need to listen to your shoes and you need to make sure that you're wearing the proper footwear for yourself, for comfort for one, but also keeping track of the mileage and stuff on them because it can make a difference. And I've never really got myself to that point of realizing like, oh shit, my shoes are like done, like, achy patella tendons and stuff like that. And going like, why is this happening? Is it because of, just the amount of running I'm doing, or is this happening because I'm running on concrete? Like what's happening? And lo and behold, get a new pair of running shoes, break them in, knee pain disappears completely. Right. So I think that would be something for people to kind of take from it is like check out your shoes, make sure that you're clocking the mileage with them and keeping track of, how much you put on them because when they wear out, it does make a big difference. And that's where, I mean, like having the proper tools is really, really important. But also that goes into like all these different events and stuff that I'm doing with training for the High Rocks. Not having some of the proper tools might bite me in the butt down the road. So we'll find out when I actually go compete. But I've done my best to try and make sure that my sleds and stuff like that have been really good. But it's still not on the same sled or the same compound that is being pushed on as the competition. So we'll kind of figure that out when we get there, if we trained well enough for it or not. But I think just that proper tool is really, really important. Then jumping back to the also, the super shoe is something that is incredible. And also, I didn't think I would ever run in a super shoe and be talking about it on a podcast. That's for sure. So the super shoe essentially is a running shoe with a carbon plate inside of it. Now, coming from a sprinting background, our sprint shoes or our sprint spikes would have a very rigid, either hard plastic or carbon plate on the bottom of them with our spikes in them, so that we would get as much feedback out of the ground as possible when we striked, and then our knee would come back up and such. So basically, technology has evolved to where we can put that type of thing, that carbon plate inside of a traditional running shoe, and also use some different foam compounds and stuff like that and different uppers to make essentially a super shoe or cheater shoe, whatever you want to call this thing. Totally illegal, but what a difference maker too, running in the carbon shoe. So the lifespan of that shoe is much shorter, so it's more of a comp shoe than it is a like training shoe, but um, it's been such a different feel to it, and I really think that also helps me learn how to run a little bit more efficient. But that shoe is using the right tool, and especially if you're doing something at a high level or trying to do it at a high level, and everyone else is using it, kind of means you got to use it too in a little bit of a way. So getting yourself comfortable with those proper tools, I think, really was a big one for me, and it's gonna also play into how I compete, I really believe. Lesson number 4 is I've learned how to accept that it's okay to train with other people. I have been such a lone soldier with my training for such a long time, and I think a lot of that was just because I like to get it in and just leave and stuff, which totally acceptable, totally fine, right? But for so many years, I've done that, and I've actually really avoided training with other people or anything like that, just because I don't want to feel like I'm tending to them or watching them. And it's kind of tough because as a strength and conditioning specialist, when I train with other people, it's hard for me to like not chime in if something's going wrong, and then I turn into coach mode, right? And I'm trying to be in athlete mode. So if I train with someone else, it's hard for me to not like pick out those things and make sure that they're doing it right. But I really have found a lot of benefit in training with a couple people that are also doing Hyroxes, and one of them is my partner for one of the Hyrox, which I didn't mention. I'm doing the men's pro at one, which is December 14th, and then December 20th, I'm doing a mixed double with a friend. So training with her has been really helpful, but also training with another athlete that is training for the one on the 14th. She's an amazing runner as well. So she has done like centuries and stuff like that. So I think it's really helpful to have some people around that are capable of things that I'm not capable of, and almost like use it as a way of like humbling myself. Like I might be strong and I might be fast as a runner, but I don't really have that attribute of endurance. So having somebody come in that does have that attribute of endurance and kind of carry me through workouts, I think has been really, really helpful and kind of a game changer to allow me to actually perform in my training so I can get better, because that accountability, like I mentioned, I write my own programs, so I don't have a coach to keep me accountable. But having somebody come through and do a hard training day with me where, maybe I want to stop or quit or something like that, really kind of keeps me going to make sure that I don't do that, because I don't want to let them down. They don't want to let me down. And we're, all trying to do this to be better and to really work hard. So I'm appreciative of, training with somebody else and having them actually come through, work hard as well, because they're trying to be the best that they can, and kind of feed off that energy. And that energy goes back and forth and stuff. And I really think without that, I wouldn't be here in my, what would this be, I think it's week 12. In week 12 of training and feeling as good as I am and also as ready as I am to go compete here in essentially 2 weeks. Lesson number 5, and the last lesson that I've learned training over the last 3 months essentially, is for this type of activity where there's a lot of running involved, a lot of heavy movement involved. you're getting multiple attributes as far as your adaptations, but you're also using a lot of different energy systems as well. And I think the big thing that I've kind of learned is that it's okay to fuel on carbohydrates a little bit more than I ever have. There's nuance around carbohydrates, but I really think it's important to understand that when your heart rate is going into a certain place or your body is using a certain energy system, be it your anaerobic glycolysis, where you're actually utilizing purely just sugar for energy, and even the aerobic glycolysis, where it's some oxygen, some sugar, you're really relying upon that sugar in your blood to get to your muscle to, feed it energy essentially. And I think just kicking up in these workouts and this training and stuff, they're about an hour long, like straight type training regimen. Like it's not just like hit a set, take a break, hit a set, take a break. So, 2 or 3 times a week, you're putting in a lot of work for about an hour's time. And that's a lot of energy that is being put out. So if that energy isn't being put back in, not just intra workout, but also outside of the workout, it really makes a big difference to have the proper amount of fueling. And I'm not necessarily like counting my macros or anything like that. I always know that my protein is where it needs to be. But one thing that I've never really followed too much is trying to actually intake a lot more carbohydrate than I typically would. And the nuance around that is when I'm not training for this, I will reduce my carbohydrate because I won't need it as much for fuel and my body won't be uptaking. And obviously, that means that that total energy expenditure is going to go down. So, in the moment of training, I really have figured out and learned that, hey, I need more carbohydrate, but I'm also going to try and do it through the best forms as possible so that, my gut doesn't get agitated and I also don't cause like inflammation and stuff like that. But I really have found it to be super, super beneficial to increase those carbs and also use the right carbs. And when I say use the right carbs, I'm meaning low glycemic index type carbs, which just simply mean that they don't spike the blood sugar nearly as much as some of the other ones. But inside of a workout, that's not really too bad of a thing to get a little bit of a blood sugar spike because your body needs that sugar in that moment. So, nuance, of course, but that's been a really good lesson just to like be like, wow, I don't think I've ever actually fueled properly in my athletic career. And it's funny because as, an exercise scientist, strength and conditioning specialist, I sit here and I'm go like, I tell people to do this stuff, but we're always our, own worst critics and we're always kind of thinking we're a little bit of the exception. Like maybe I don't need that, but this is what the book says. So I'm gonna make sure that my athletes get this, but I'm not really training that hard. But now it's like, okay, I am actually training this hard and I do need exactly what, the prescription is for these things and maybe some adjustments and stuff. But really makes a big difference. And honestly, I'm pretty grateful for that lesson because at 32 and also 11 years into my career as a coach, it's really nice to learn different lessons and take those lessons for myself and hopefully be able to apply them to athletes as well that I work with. Because I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. So I'm just kind of figuring out things as I go. Obviously, 11 years of experience goes a long way, but I still don't know everything yet. So I like to be a little bit of a test dummy, a little bit. That's how this really came about. Me training was because I had people asking me to train them for Hyrox. I'm like, well, I've never even done it. So I figured I would do it. And, I have friends that want to do it. So we kind of all just gathered together and made this thing happen. So super excited for the event and everything, but I'm even more happy about the lessons that I've learned just from the training to the point where whatever happens, happens now with the competition and whatnot. And I can still take away a lot of these good things. So hope that if you're training that you can kind of watch this video and be like, yeah, these are really good points. Maybe take away a lot of this positive from your training and then takes a little bit of pressure off of your event. And who knows, maybe you'll go compete better because of that. If you stuck around this far, I appreciate you staying listening all the way through these lessons. If you want a program, I do have a Hyrox program that is available. I have also a bunch of other programs from running to motocross, snowboarding, mountain biking, all of that across the board. So if that's something that you're interested in, head over to the website at outlierathlete.com. Check those out. Otherwise, thank you once again for listening or watching. I'll catch you in the next one.